All right. Hello, 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 and good afternoon. Welcome back. Welcome to the season finale of our relationship series, season number 3, y'all. Um, and I'm going to give about 30 seconds as people straggle in, either off their lunch breaks or going on lunch breaks and so on. And then we'll jump in, or perhaps we'll just sort of maneuver in slowly. But as you know, we're here on the relationship series where we have transformational conversations about how to revolutionize our relationships. And we say here that we do the work, we heal for real, and we sow what we want to grow. And I'm Genevieve. I am your gracious and passionate host. Some of you know me. I am a speaker, I am a trainer, I'm a coach, I'm a registered psychotherapist, I'm a world traveler, and I'm a lover of life and relationships. And again, I am not an expert on relationships. Okay, some people. I was on a podcast the other day, and it was for a wellness a wellness campaign. A principal out in I think it was Texas, and he says we have a relationship expert here with us, and I was like, no, 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 no. I am not an expert on relationships. However, um, I do believe that we were born for relationships, and that any time spent talking about relationships is time well spent. And I do have a passion for relationships and for learning, as well as sharing and talking about how to do them well, right? How to do them to the best of our abilities. So I discovered my passion for relationships way back when I was a teenager. I share this story all the time. I looked around me, my mom and my dad were getting divorced. I just saw jacked up relationships all around, and I thought, my goodness, there must be a better way. There has to be a better way to do this thing. And so since then, it's really fueled my desire to search for ways in which we can do relationships better, interact, engage, love one another, serve one another better. And that's relationships of all kinds, of all sorts, right? We're looking at relationship with self, relationship with God, or spirituality, if you're a believer or a person of faith, relationships with other people in different contexts. So platonic relationships, romantic relationships, family relationships, what else is there? Work, colleague, career relationships, all of the things. Um, and so that's what we get to do here in this space. And I like to make sure everybody that comes in knows that you are welcome and invited to share your own experiences with within your relationships, as we discuss and unpack the topic of the day. You can throw on your mic, right? You can raise your hand. You can type in the chat. I always keep the chat up here open so that I can see who is chatting, who's saying what, and I can read your comments and so on. So you are definitely more than invited to engage. It is a transformational conversation, and conversations, of course, is more than just me talking. And so I know that you guys always have your input, and I welcome it, and I cherish it, and I learn from it, and other people do too, and I get really good feedback. So again, I invite you to take the time today, to share and to engage. Um, as per usual, this is our agenda. We have a definition usually to ground us in what we're talking about, right? And so today we're talking about I'm pregnant, which is an interesting topic. I think I said I'm pregnant, and people were like, "You're pregnant." And I was like, "Wait, no, 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 no. It's just the topic of the day." So we're going to be talking about all things pregnancy related. And there are a lot of things that are pregnancy related that have nothing to do with a fetus growing inside of a body. And we'll get a chance to unpack that as well. So we're going to be talking about definitions. We're going to have some quotes or some thoughts. And so there are sometimes some just interesting things that I think are really cool to know about the topic that I come across in research, that I love to share, and just, some cool things to be able to take away as we engage with the topic. We're going to look at some statistics, which are always really important to ground us in facts and figures, because sometimes we have lofty or societal thoughts or beliefs that are fueled by our personal experiences or by the experiences of those who've been influential in our lives. But those experiences are not true in terms of the facts, figures, or the numbers. And so let me see, what's a good example of that? A good example of that would be um, people, I don't know, I can't even think of a good example of that right now. Um, well, I heard somebody talking about this the other day because I travel a lot and I love to fly, and so they're like, "Aren't you afraid? Aren't you afraid to fly?" And I was like, "Well, I mean, the numbers show." I asked them. I was like, "Are you afraid to drive?" And they were like, "No. I get in a car and I go where I need to go." And I said, "Well, the numbers actually show it's more likely that you die in a car accident than you die in a plane crash. So it's safer to fly if you think about it." So that's sort of, based in our perception and our understanding. It's, of course, it's more convenient to drive, and of course, it's more accessible to drive. But when it comes to the numbers, the facts and the figures, right? That denotes truth more so than our personal experiences or our feelings or the experiences of those who are around us in our very limited scope of people, right? Of our limited community. So so we'll look at stats. Stats always help us to determine some of the facts. We'll look, of course, at the benefits of talking about this topic, which we always do, and some of the practical ways in which we can continue to do the work. And then I'll always challenge you guys. I'll challenge you guys, and then we'll look at what's coming up, and then I'll answer any questions that you might have. All right. So this is for you if pregnancy has been a part of your life in a pleasant way or a painful way, and you would like to talk about the impact of pregnancy. And so this is I noted some words here, and I had a friend say to me, the words are very triggering. The word abortion, the word infertility, the word miscarriage, like the miscarriage or stillbirth or stillborn. These are very triggering words because they are very painful experiences. And so, here we are talking about the topic, and it's important to give language and be able to resonate with the reality of what the situation is. And that's why I've chosen to label. This is why I've chosen to label very clearly what we are talking about, as opposed to some of the flowery language that we've developed over time to in a lot of ways assuage ourselves, so that it's not as forceful. The hit is not as forceful to us. um but part of what I believe is helpful for relationships is developing language around the things that are difficult, and the things that do cause pain. So that's why I've chosen to use the terms that are clinical and that are clear in our conversation today. So if you're pregnant, if you were pregnant, if you experienced pregnancy or saw your parents get pregnant, or you might be on a fertility journey, or you've experienced infertility, or maybe you're older, you're single, exploring the possibility of having a child, as a single person, or perhaps you're a single father, or not a father, maybe just a man, and you're thinking about, like, how, what if I want to have a child but I don't have a wife, all those things. All those pieces are important for us today to talk about. And whether it's shameful or it's joyful, or all terrifying, all of these pieces are important to resonate with, to really talk about, because they're real and they affect how we show up. They affect how we feel about ourselves. They affect how we treat other people. They affect how we react and respond to other people. I said to somebody the other day, um depending, and I grew up in church, right? And so this has been a very interesting point of reference as I've grown up, because I've seen young ladies get pregnant out of wedlock. And so depending on, of course, whether or not you're married, you're single, pregnancy can be very shameful, or it can be very, either they're going to throw shade, or they're going to throw you a shower, kind of thing, right? And so it can be very polarizing, some of these experiences, personal experiences, that we have when it comes to pregnancy, and walking out of pregnancy. that either ends in, and we'll talk a little bit about this, what the end result or the outcome can look like based on our experience, of pregnancy. We might be pregnant and feeling ashamed because we're not married. And so what can that influence, right? Or we might be pregnant and, feeling excited and, whatever the case is, right? And so that can really influence our choices and our behaviors in the moment when it comes to pregnancy. So we'll look at all of that, our shared experiences, um, and and then we'll come to some kind of consensus or end, I should say. All right, so pregnancy, very basic definition for us today. It is the time that a fetus develops inside the uterus. That is it. That's all. That's where we're that's where we're landing. Now, there's a lot of conversation about um uh when when a child becomes a child, when it's important to protect the child, or when it becomes alive. There's a lot there. So we're not going to be talking about that. We're going to ground ourselves in just the entire process. We're going to take it as, you got the pregnancy test and it says positive, or you give birth. Okay, so we're using all of that as pregnancy, and the fetus developing. Okay, and a lot happens in this. A lot happens to get to this point. We know that, right? Obviously, you have to have intercourse and all the things, and the cycle and the ovulation and the sperm and the egg and all the things, right? So we're just talking about, hey, when do you find out you're pregnant, and when you find out you're pregnant, and when you give birth. Okay, so we'll ground ourselves in that, and then we'll go from there. All right. So I don't know. This is a feel-good story, and I thought I'd throw this in here because it is kind of a heavy topic if we think about it. Um, and so, yeah, I just wanted us to sort of have a feel-good opportunity to have a feel-good story um, with us. Hold on just one moment. Okay. Have a feel-good story. So this is Chidier Berry Ibe, and he is a Nigerian medical student. I think actually he is doing, because I checked an update of him in the week, and I was reading about him. So he's actually in the Ukraine now. I think he's practicing or teaching in some capacity, but he's also an illustrator. So he's a medical student and an illustrator. And as he was studying, he realized that there were very little images, very minimal images of Black skin, or representation of Black people in the medical field when it came to diagnosing illnesses and things like that. So they would show like, oh, this is psoriasis, or this is hives, or this is whatever, but it would always be on white skin. And so there, of course, very typically, these are the fallopian tubes, or this is a uterus, or this is when the baby grows in the belly, the uterus, or what have you. And it was always white skin. And so he decided to start um, drawing, some of these things with Black skin, Black representation. And of course, this image goes viral because somebody saw it and they commented and they said, I've literally never seen a Black baby, a Black fetus growing in a Black body, like in a picture. And it went viral, and he gained all the popularity and all this stuff, and he's now been contracted, of course, to create Black images in the medical field, which is amazingly powerful, right? But like, think about it. We're in 2024 here. I think this was actually in 2000, and I think it was 2019 or somewhere around there. But either way, we're in the 2000s, and for that to be the situation now, I thought, my goodness, how we're growing, right? I mean, it's slow moving, yes, but we're growing. and we're getting there, so to speak, right? So I just thought this was a really nice story to share, because there are so many um there are so many uh like implications when it comes to this. And we know that, traditionally there have been very clear discrepancies in the healthcare system, especially when it comes to treating um people of color and non people of color. I don't know, the political terms escape me right now. White folks and non-white folks, okay? Um, and so traditionally we've experienced inequities as Black folks, especially when it comes to giving birth, childbirth. We're talking about what's it called? Not infertility. Oh goodness, what's the word I'm looking for? Sterile, being sterile. They used to sterilize Black women, like, so they couldn't have children. Um, I don't think that's the actual term. Um, is it sterilize?
Yes, you
Anyway,
are correct.
say again.
You are correct. It's sterilized.
It's sterilized? Okay, yes, thank you.
Yeah.
So yeah, so they used to do that for Black women, right? And so we're looking at like how many injustices have taken place in the healthcare system when it comes to us, and over the years, and so he's advocating basically for racial health justice in his illustration. And he's doing it in a positive and powerful way, with his drawings and so on, right? But he's definitely advocating for us as we go along. So anyway, I thought that was a really cool feel good story, and we want to congratulate him and encourage him to continue. Okay, let's talk about women's bodies and world bodies. So what I found is that um, when it comes to pregnancy, we talk about Mother Nature giving birth and all these things, and women are the mothers of the earth and all this kind of stuff. Like, what I found is that women's bodies are both miraculous and mysterious, um, because of the fact that we can give birth. Um, but they're also offensive in a lot of ways. And so, over the last few years, I can't remember the lawsuit in the US, but over the last few years, there's been a resurgence, of course, of the abortion question and the abortion law debate, and who gets to choose? Who gets to choose what to do with the fetus, with the baby, whatever the case might be, and a lot of people lean to, of course, it's the woman's body and they get to choose. They have ownership of their bodies. We're here in 2020 odd. Um, and so that's a very prevalent idea. But when you think about like where we've come from, women's bodies have been world bodies. Like, men traditionally have had opportunity to dictate and to determine what happens with women's bodies, what they do, how they use them, how women use their bodies, and how men use their bodies. And I thought to myself, even as I was just thinking about, this topic, and how we've come such a long way, and yes, there's advanced healthcare now, and there are different things. And I was looking at the maternal mortality rate, because in the 1960s or the 1600s, maternal mortality rate was like super high. I think it was like in the 25th percentile. And and now it's decreased significantly because we have so much um, um, technology to help us, right? We can find out when we're pregnant, and we can start doing prenatal this and prenatal that, and supplements this, and taking care of our bodies in a better way. And there are so many ways to detect whether or not there's something going wrong with our bodies, and to help that, or to treat that in advance. Whereas in the past, without some of these technologies, women would just die. Women would just die, whether it was sickness or whether it was internal bleeding, anything like that. Women, I mean, there was really no chance, for them, if you're hemorrhaging, or you get sepsis or something like that, like, or the baby's breached, like, you can't see that in advance, but now we have those technologies to help us identify those things. um and so I was thinking about it as um the evolution of the technology that has been developed and also the policies that have been developed around women's bodies. Like, these are conversations when it comes to women's bodies and what women choose to do with their bodies and how women use their bodies and how babies come out of women's bodies. Like, these are conversations that are taking place in political arenas within levels of government, not just on the ground with parents and their daughters. You know what I mean? Like, sweetheart, make sure you don't talk to the boys on the street. You're 15 years old, or don't come home pregnant. I don't think my mom ever gave me that conversation, like, don't come home pregnant. But I know she used to talk about, like, relationships with boys in a very derogatory way when I was younger. It'd be like, oh, don't be hanging around the boys too much and whatever. But she never explicitly said, like, don't bring home no baby for me, or don't, come home pregnant. But she'd be like, don't be so fast. That's a very Caribbean term. Um, but it's not just in those contexts that we're discussing, the potential for pregnancy. What are the implications on the ground with a mother and a daughter, or a father and a daughter, right? What happens if you get pregnant as a teenager? What happens if you get pregnant and the boy doesn't want to take care of it, or whatever the case might be on the ground? That's very different from, you know, uh, lawsuits that are taking place and that are being discussed, like, on the federal government level. And then we're having countries, like governments from different countries, weigh in on this conversation, right? And so we're talking, yes, women's bodies, what we choose to do with our bodies, how we choose to behave sexually speaking, or even in terms of making decisions about having children, because it doesn't have to always involve sex. There's other ways, fertility and infertility, or IVF and things like that. But thinking about it, I was like, man, this is bigger than we think. And so it affects and impacts all kinds of relationships, right? Like, yes, our relationships with ourselves and our mothers, we might have seen them have multiple children, or our friends. I had a client who said that they uh they were what's the word she used? I can't remember the word she used, but basically she was afraid of talking to her friend, and sharing her good news, because she got pregnant, because her friend wasn't able to get pregnant. Like, I was like, man, like, this is, and she herself was distancing. She herself was kind of pulling away from her friend, and she could talk about it, but I thought to myself, her friend must be like, why is she acting this way? You know what I mean? It's impacting the relationship, and it's not being talked about. And so her friend doesn't know. And we don't know what's gonna happen to I don't know what's gonna happen to that relationship. But the idea that your own process, your own experience of pregnancy can impact, or or result in the dissolution, or the distancing, or the disconnection within a relationship, is so fascinating to me. And then, of course, on a larger level, just the polarizing effect that it can have. People are having protests in the streets. People, like, wow, this is people are traveling to distant lands and countries to have abortions. Like, this is, I don't think we realize just, like, how big this is. When we talk about this topic and how it impacts and affects our capacity to relate with ourselves, to accept, or to not accept, I don't know, but to interrelate with each other, and things like that. So I thought I'd throw this out there, just in terms of recognizing that it goes from, the individual. I'm a woman, obviously, right? The individual, and not even, wait a minute, I just thought of this. Not even just that. Like, thinking about individuals who now can have reassignment surgery, and they don't have the internal organisms or what have you, but they can identify as women. They can, we're talking about transgender, transsexual, and things like that. Like, how does that impact them? You know what I mean? Oh man, there's just so many layers. So looking at, from the individual, and sort of broadening our scope and our perspective to understand that this topic, it affects so many different layers and levels from the micro to the macro, right? And all of that integration and interrelatedness and interconnection, it's all intertwined. And it all intersects really when it comes to our relationships with our jobs, and we'll talk about this in a minute. Our relationships when it comes to institutions, right? Where we go, where we are, when it's, I mean, we're talking all levels, healthcare, yes, education, yes. We're talking about the media, entertainment, we're talking about all levels of society, and family and so on, when it comes to this topic, and it affects our relationship with all those topics, and not to mention finances, my goodness, because money is so involved when it comes to this process. But yeah, you guys are free to let me know your thoughts. Let me know your thoughts on that, and if any of this is sort of resonating with you. So I thought this was cool too. Um, well, I guess in the 1500s or so on and so forth, basically they didn't have a way to know if women were pregnant until like the baby moved in their body. Like there were no tests that were involved. So I mean, women just didn't know. And even today, I've heard of stories where women didn't know they were pregnant until they actually gave birth. Like they would be going to the bathroom or something, and then a child would come out. Like imagine that. My goodness. Um, but I thought this was cool. This is called the Hogbin frog test. So this test was named after the scientist. And I think to myself, like, how scientists, sir, how did you figure out that? Okay, let me tell you about the test. So the test is they take women's urine, women who think they're pregnant. So they might think they're pregnant because, of course, they may have missed a period, or their period is late, or obviously you had sex with somebody. And so you think, oh, maybe I'm pregnant. And so they take the woman's urine and they inject it into the back of this frog. This is an African clawed frog. Okay. They inject it into the back of this frog. And within, I think, 24 or 48 hours, the frog begins to, it like ovulates, or it produces eggs. Okay. So when the frog produces eggs, that means that the woman is pregnant. Okay. If the frog doesn't produce the eggs, then the woman is not pregnant. And this had, it was like, it was almost like 100% accuracy rate. Now, my thing is, sir, how did you find this out? Like, did you like trip over your shoes with a syringe full of women's urine and land on the frog? Like, what happened for you to think to yourself, like, I can use this frog to determine whether, and it's only the African clawed frog. So like, what, I honestly, I read this and I thought to myself, wow, like we are amazing beings, because we come up with some stuff, I tell you. So anyway, I thought it was really, really fascinating. I mean, you can inject a frog with urine and find out, you know, 12 hours later, whether or not you're pregnant. And so, yeah, thank you to Mr. Hogbin for finding that out. In I don't know, I think it was the early 1900s. And so that brings me to my next point, that I don't know if you guys know when the modern at-home pregnancy test was developed. Does anybody know when our pregnancy test was developed? The one that you go to Shoppers Drug Mart and get if you've ever been pregnant or had a pregnancy scare. Does anybody know? Does anybody know that? Anybody want to venture a guess? Any thoughts? Any thoughts? Any thoughts? Share your thoughts, guys. Okay, we're quiet today. All right. Well, the at-home pregnancy test that we know of today, that's super accessible, easy to get, was developed in 1976. Like the other day. 1976. Like, what? I honestly didn't know this. I was like, I mean, maybe not within my lifetime, but pretty close, right? And I thought, my goodness, like, what did we do before that? And which is why I started looking up, like, what did they do before that? when it came to pregnancy. But yeah, the 1976 is when it became FDA approved, and in the United States it went on the market. And then of course, globalization and accessibility and imports, exports, and so on. And so now it's across the world, and everybody and anybody can get their hands on a pregnancy test and pee on a stick, pretty much, right? And I think they're 99.9% accurate in terms of determining whether or not you're pregnant. So I just thought, man, that's really cool to know that we are still advancing when it comes to um, this area of our lives. We're talking about reproduction, I'm sorry, and reproductive health. Um, and so yeah, I thought that was pretty cool as well. All right. I thought we'd do a couple of myths or a few myths today because as I was doing my research and reading, I was chuckling to myself because I was like, is this serious? Like there have been, and I'm sure you guys have heard it if you've ever seen something, if you've ever gone to a baby shower, if you've ever been pregnant, not been pregnant, if you ever heard your mother talk about anything, like we hear them all the time. Oh, you're carrying low, so that means you're having a boy, or you're carrying high, so that means you're having a girl. I've heard it. I know I've heard it a number of times. The spicy food one is taking me out. Yeah. So, so basically, it says that it's like a superstition. If you eat spicy food, your child, it could burn your child's eyes and they could come out blind. So don't eat spicy food when you're pregnant. I was like, are you serious? Like, that's funny to me. I was done. The other one was wide hips make childbirth easier. So people, if you have the what is it, typical like hourglass figure and you have wide hips, they'd be like, oh, you have baby making hips, which is actually not true, funny enough, because I looked it up. I was like, is that true? Because there's some truth to something, right? There's something around it that you have to kind of think more deeply about. It's actually if you have a wide pelvis, right? So there's like, anyway, there's like bones, and anyway, you guys don't need to know the science, but it's kind of true, but it's not true. And then the more you rub on your belly, because sometimes I don't know if you've ever done it, but I've actually done it. I don't do it anymore, but I used to, like, pregnant women, and you go and you like rub their belly, and like even that, think about it, like you're going to touch a stranger's body. You know what I mean? And that's why it's sometimes like um it's sometimes not intuitive. It's like your body is like the pregnant body doesn't belong to the world. It belongs to the individual. But we've come, we've had such these interesting ideas about how we share and how we participate in women's bodies and women's pregnancies. And I know there was a time where I didn't think about it. I would just go and touch the body because that's what I saw other people doing. And I felt obligated. I'm sorry, I felt entitled to, oh, you were having a baby and so on and so forth. And even sometimes, well, people that I know that are closer would be like, oh, touch here, the baby's kicking, which is very different because there's relationship there. But the more you rub on the belly, like more you rub your belly, is the more you will spoil your child. Your child will come out spoiled. These are real, guys. These are real things that people think about, people actually say and do. I was like, wow, that's amazing. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. If you wouldn't touch her on a regular Tuesday, then don't touch her when she's pregnant. Absolutely. And I completely agree with that now. But this is I think it's Serena or Venus, one of these Williams sisters. Um, and well, she was like playing, exercising, like doing all the do's while she was pregnant, and people were like, oh, you can't exercise while you're pregnant, you're gonna damage the baby. And she was like, "No, I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true." And she went hard, like went hard. She used to do 7-hour workouts or something like that in the gym, or she used to split 4 and 3 each and every day. Like she's like deezed. And she continued while she was pregnant, and her baby came out just fine. So anyway, there's a lot of myths that I've heard. You can't fly on an airplane while you're pregnant. And I've seen lots of pregnant women on airplanes, and I'm sure that their babies come out just fine, right? Um, and what's another one? I don't know if you guys have any myths that you guys have heard growing up about pregnancy. But yeah, share them if you can remember them.
That if you're having a girl, she takes your beauty. So basically,
Oh, yes,
it's
yes, yes, yes. I've heard that. I've heard that.
no
And
spreads and you look jacked having a girl.
say again?
So so if your nose spreads and your face looks jacked up and your skin is all a mess and everything, that means you're having a girl because
You're
girls take
having
away
it.
your beauty.
Yes, 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 yes. That's a good one. Yeah, it's true. It's true. I've heard that. Um, and I think it was not too long ago. This was a couple years back, but a friend of mine got pregnant and was her hair was thinning in the middle, like her hair was thinning out in the or breaking in the middle of her head, and she didn't want to find out what she was having until she had the baby. She wanted to be a surprise. And then she was like, "Oh, I think I'm having a girl because my hair is breaking." Like, man, we come up with some stuff, I tell you. And I don't know if that's true. I mean, I'm highly doubtful that there's
No,
truth
not
to
true.
it. Yeah, that exactly. Um,
Not true.
so there you have it. So those are some really cool myths. If you guys think of any more, you guys can throw them in the chat. But I think they're funny, especially when it comes to pregnancy. I mean, pregnancy is it's a real life like phenomenon, right? It's yeah. Anyway, thought it was cute. Okay, let's talk about some of the things. And so I think I have maybe four or five slides. Okay, we're going to talk about pregnancy and not pregnancy itself, but some of the we'll call them tendrils. Okay, so some of the ways in which pregnancy affects and impacts different aspects and areas of our lives. Okay, pregnancy loss, I think, is the number one, and Mm, hmm. So let's say pregnancy, I'm going to say pregnancy loss in terms of um, two things. One, miscarriage, and two, um, what they would call a stillbirth. So there's a difference. If you um, if you have a spontaneous abortion, sometimes they call it that. If you lose the child, lose the pregnancy within the first 11 weeks, they call it a miscarriage. If you lose the pregnancy, 12 weeks and going forward up until labor, they call it a stillbirth or a stillborn.
Mm.
Okay, so it doesn't have, like, stillborn is not just when you give birth, in other words. Okay, so it's 12 weeks and above. um and I think okay, so yeah, we'll leave it at that. So pregnancy loss is obviously a real thing, and you'll see the statistics in a second of how common it is. But the impact is just as significant as a death or as a divorce, right? And so we're transitioning from one phase of reality to another. Okay. And so I want us to grasp that because it's not just, oh, well, you just try again, right? It's a loss. And the body keeps the score. So when your body becomes pregnant, it begins to prepare itself
Mm-hmm.
for the development and the birth or bringing forth of a child. Okay. And so I mean, I don't know if you've ever been, I've never been pregnant. So this is all research. And of course, I know people who've been pregnant. So they've shared their experiences with me, which is great. Um, but we're talking about physical, but our bodies are created intelligently and are created well. They are created to sustain themselves and to function in a particular way. So they're designed well. So when you get pregnant, right, the sperm and the egg, and oh my goodness, hey, we're going to have a child, then the body begins to produce what it needs for the child to grow and to be healthy. Okay. And so it will produce more of whatever, less of whatever, and so on and so forth. Now, when there's a pregnancy loss, the body itself has to then begin the grieving process. So the body has to change back to or transform it, maybe not back to, it has to transition to through the loss and until it gets back to homeostasis, so to speak. Okay, homeostasis meaning baseline or um, back to natural or neutral. state, unpregnant, okay? And so there's a lot that happens there physically, and then there's a lot more that happens there emotionally and psychologically. And so the mental health implications of pregnancy loss on any level are uh, usually last 2 to 3 times longer than it takes for the body to adjust. Okay, so if your body then, I mean, if you get pregnant, you have a child, and your body snaps back or what have you in 9 months or a year or 12 months or what have you, um, or you lose a child and your body recovers within 3 to 6 months or so. And I think that the average is actually about 9 months right now when it comes to miscarriage, and stillbirth, right? So the body has to readjust. It needs to get back to homeostasis, and so it is healing itself. It's recovering, and so it's also grieving, and it takes 2 to 3 times longer for your mental, your psychological healing to happen. And I think people miss this because,
Mhm.
one, a lot of people just don't talk about this. Um,
Mhm.
they just don't, because it's still stigmatized and taboo, right? And so people are like, oh yeah, whatever. But we're talking about like prolonged grief, prolonged depression, prolonged anxiety. We're talking about dealing with the psychological implications and impacts of walking through a loss like this, because it is so internal, it is so physical, and it has so many deep meanings attached to it, right? And so I want us to highlight that, and even just to take away um, that, one, this is common, but two, that on so many levels, this is important for us to understand. If you are a person who's been pregnant, that's one thing. If you've walked with somebody through pregnancy loss, that's another thing. Like, it's not just the person going through, oh, they lost the baby and they'll, their bodies will be okay in the next couple of months. Like, they've announced this to people. People are anticipating, people are vying for the godmother, godfather status. People are saying, hey, I'm going to be auntie so-and-so, and hey, I'm going to be grandma so-and-so. And they're like the community, the family, the church, the I don't know, the co-workers or whatever, like, people are invested in child creation, in the child creation process, right? And most people don't, like, I mean, now they say wait till the first trimester is over, but that wasn't the case. It was like, ooh, I got my pregnancy test back, I'm pregnant, right? And so there's a loss on so many different levels, not just physically and not just emotionally or psychologically, but of course when it comes to our relationships, right? And so they experience the loss as well. And we'll talk about pregnancy itself in just a second, but when we look at what happens during pregnancy loss, we then have to share um, that information. Sometimes we do, and sometimes we don't. Sometimes it's just too hard. Um, but you have to sort of think about, how that impacts our relationships as well, and people who walk through the loss with you, because now they're like, oh, I'm not going to be auntie so and so just yet, or I'm not going to be godfather so and so just yet, right? Or I'm not going to be a grandfather or a grandmother just yet, and they have to walk through that grief as well. And sometimes it can even look like PTSD. I'm talking like post-traumatic stress disorder. I know every time I do a lot of family of origin work with clients, and every time I do family of origin work, if I see more than a 3-year gap in between children, I always ask, I'm like, did your mother have an abortion or did your mother have a miscarriage? Because usually children are born in quicker succession. Um, and if there has been a miscarriage, that changes how that mother will show up for their first child or their second child or whatever, whichever number. That changes how the dynamic of the family. It changes how they interact with life, right? And so that can have a very big impact on how the family grows or how the family develops, and so on. So I always ask, the question, and we have to ask the questions. We have to ask questions. Um, okay, let's look at pregnancy plus emotion equals response. So what I mean by that is How you feel about the pregnancy will determine how you respond to it. Okay. If I'm pregnant out of wedlock, I'm single and I have a lot of money and I can go wherever I want, do whatever I want. Well, hey, and I wanted to have a child, great. Right. I'm gonna raise my child on my own. I don't need nobody. I don't need anybody's money. I don't, okay, fine. I feel like, I'm an independent person. And I walk through the pregnancy and so on. If I'm pregnant, sorry, if I get pregnant, I'm single and I'm not financially stable and I'm in the church, um, and all these things, I might feel a lot of shame. I might feel a lot of fear, right? And so that might
Mhm.
lead to different outcomes at times. And my response might be to isolate or to remove myself from community, sometimes even to terminate the pregnancy. And I've walked with people through that as well, with clients through that as well, or from, oh, whoops, I'm pregnant, to, oh, I don't even like this person because it was a one night stand or it was a very fleeting relationship, to, okay, let me wrestle with the idea of terminating a pregnancy, even though it contradicts all of my beliefs. It goes against what I've said are my values for life, all my life, and having to wrestle, with that. So our response is really determined by how we feel about it, right? And pregnancy changes your life. Like there's no, I always say we can recover from anything. Okay, we're humans. We can recover. We can reconcile. We can do the only thing we can't recover from is pregnancy. We cannot give back a child. We can't put the child back in the womb and send it back to from whence it came. Like that we can't. I've seen people recover from cancer, recover from abusive relationships, we can recover from anything. But pregnancy, I'm so sorry, sweetheart. It's just not gonna happen. We can't, we can't recover from that. Um, so there's a lot of things that we have to hold there. So a lot of things come up when we hear or know or find out we're pregnant, right? It's like guilt, shame, I don't know, anxiety, fear, disappointment, joy, excitement, anticipation, expectation. Um, I don't know, there's so many things, right, that comes up. So our response always is determined by our emotion. And this is for individuals as they walk through pregnancy, um, for themselves, but also for people who are in their sphere of influence or within their community, right? And so I might feel empathy for someone who I know, maybe they got pregnant as a teenager, teenage pregnancy. Maybe they're in my youth group or something like that, or my little sister, if I'm a big sister, right? And they get pregnant. It's like, oh man, like I feel for you because I know this is not the context, one, that I would want to be pregnant in, nor did you have a plan for that, right? And so we respond or we lean in accordingly based on how we feel about the pregnancy. All right, pregnancy and self. Let's talk about the internal pressures when it comes to pregnancy. There's so much information out there, guys. I don't know if you guys know the sheer number of products that are available for children out there, for babies, sorry,
Mhm.
and for
Mhm.
pregnant women. Oh,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, right? It's like money making. If I could come up with one
Mhm.
product that went that like every single woman who thought about getting pregnant would get, I would be a billionaire. Like the market is crazy. Like there's
Mhm.
so much, so many articles, so many podcasts, there's so much information, so many books and so many products. Oh, it's crazy. Anyway, so I think what that does is it actually fuels internal pressure
Mhm.
to know stuff. I need to um have the bio oil, or I need to be, there I need to be taking prenatal vitamin 6 months before I try to get pregnant. And like there's just you didn't take the probiotics to, there's just so much. So I think there's internal pressure to do it right, get it right, know everything, get the right products. We have to get this product because it has the safety feature on it, and this has the extra this on it, and this has the new Bluetooth blah 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 on it. And we have sometimes really like unrealistic and impossible standards and expectations for ourselves as we move through this particular phase of life. um and that like perfectionist approach, like I have to make sure I do everything right, and so on. And it just doesn't work out that way. right? Or like, oh, don't, make sure you do your yoga so that your body stretches with the with the baby and you don't gain weight, and or even after you have a child. Ooh, like baby weight, right? Even that can be very shaming, that process. Um, as well. It's like, well, sometimes we have pressure on ourselves to like lose the baby fat and lose it,
Mm-hmm.
fast, and so on. And it's like we're dissatisfied with our bodies that have brought forth children, right? Like think about that. Like you brought forth a whole child, and you're dissatisfied with your body because it doesn't look the way that you did pre-baby. And I remember I went for a hike with some friends, and it was a gentleman actually. He commented, and he's like, um, well, look how fit these three people are. And it was three of us women, and there was a group, and one woman commented, and she's like, yeah, that's because those three haven't had kids yet, right? And I
Right.
obviously one of them, and I thought, whoa, first of all, calm down. But second of all, first of all, how dare you? Second of all, calm down. Third of all, it's true.
Mm-hmm.
It's true. Your body
Exactly.
changes, right? You brought forth a whole human, right?
Right. Right.
Right? And so, just even thinking about like how we internalize some of these thoughts and ideas, and how it plays out. Some of us have maladaptive eating happy habits. We get down on ourselves. I've also walked with clients through like postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, peripartum anxiety, or postpartum psychosis, right? There are real implications and changes and impacts and effects, when it comes to pregnancy in the self. And we might be crying uncontrollably. We don't know. Well, I mean, we do know why, but we don't know how to handle it, right? So yeah, there's the self to deal with, as we walk through this pregnancy journey, and that also means the pregnancy idea. So this is not just physical pregnancy, right? So this is also recognize, like I haven't had children, I've never been pregnant, so even myself as a single woman, how do I think about pregnancy as a whole, right? Approaching pregnant. Do I want to get pregnant? Oh, I do. If I do want to get pregnant, what does it mean that I'm not pregnant, right? What does it mean that I'm,
Mm-hmm.
I'm here at this point in time in my life? Do I want
Mm-hmm.
to move forward to get pregnant? And will I do that without a husband or without a spouse, right? Like we're talking about pregnancy, yes, as a physical experience, but also as a psychological experience, because we're women. We are the only ones who get pregnant, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if we've tried to get pregnant and we haven't been able to get pregnant, if we have gotten pregnant and had an abortion and now we want to get pregnant and cannot get pregnant, how do
Mm-hmm.
these things like weigh on us? How do we think about, some of these pieces as we compare ourselves to other people? Not everybody's like Serena Williams, getting pregnant and doing 7-hour workouts. Like that's not a thing, right? So, how do we even think about the possibility or the idea of pregnancy? I remember I went to like just check out myself, right? I was thinking, oh, I'm getting older. I went through this whole fertility journey, and like first of all, intrusive, invasive, like just
Mm-hmm.
like does any it's like a full-time job. It's like a full-time
Mm-hmm.
it's like a whole full-time job. Um, and even to think about like IVF or things like that, or getting a donor or what have you, it's like, whoa, like this is a huge, huge, huge part of life. It takes time, it takes energy, it takes money, right? It takes community, but it has to be done in an intentional way. So there's so many implications when it comes to pregnancy and the self, both if you are physically pregnant and if you're thinking about, dreaming about, or even if you're maybe older now and you wanted to be pregnant, but now it's not a possibility, or you've gone through like a hysterectomy or things like that. Like you have to think about, what is this whole pregnancy thing, and and the self. Joanne, I see your hand. Talk to me.
Oh, that's weird. Please don't call me that.
Oh, sorry, Candy.
I just realized that so I'm listening to you, of course, and like I just find that I don't know if it's like this for men because I'm not a man, but I just find that from the moment we as females are born, the expectations start, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
as soon as we're born, and they are
That's my next
like
slide. I love it.
it's like it's debilitating. It's just like like you can't just function on a
Yeah.
day to day because there's always some expectation. There's an expectation that you're going to go through puberty in this certain way. There's an expectation that you're going to have breasts. There's an
Yeah.
expectation that your body's going to look a certain way. And when it doesn't look a certain way, there's an expectation that you have to do something in order to make it look a certain way. There's an
Yeah.
expectation now that you should be a nurturer. There's an expectation
Yep.
that you have to be wholesome and healed as a woman. And like there's an expectation now for you to be independent, but then there's also an expectation for you to be dependent. There's an
Right.
expectation for you to
I
be
love it.
pregnant, but no, you can't be pregnant at this time. You have to be pregnant. You have to wait until this time. Then the expectation to be married, but no, you don't want to be married. You can't be married by this age. You have to be
Right.
married by this age. And what happens if you're not married by this age? Then there's this age. And then when you do get married and everything falls apart, then there's the expectation that like I'm like listening
Yep.
to you and I'm just like, I think I'm gonna log off because I can't deal with all the expectations and
All
then
of them.
how you're supposed to look, how you're supposed to sound, what you're
Hmm.
supposed to do when you don't look or sound the way the expectation wants you to. And
Yeah.
then and I'm thinking who and then the realization that the expectations come from men, and I have an issue with
Yeah.
this,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
Because they do not have a realistic view of what actually should be happening, right? And then there's this expectation now to have children, to get over it if you have had a pregnancy, if you lose the pregnancy,
Yep. Yep.
and life goes on, and
Hmm.
and if you do have a baby, what's supposed to happen when you do have that baby? And just the expectation to perform in the same way, even though you're going through a grieving process, or if a child is sick
Yeah.
in the hospital, when you like like all these expectations to just function like a human being, and then an expectation for you to show up. Like I'm listening to you, and I'm like, Jen is sick, and I'm appreciative of the fact that you're online, but I'm also your sister, and I'm like, but why the hell are you online? You could have canceled this and actually just taken care of yourself. But there's this expectation for you to show up
Mm-hmm.
and just perform the way you're supposed to perform because there's an expectation. And I'm like,
Yeah.
but cancel, right? Right.
That is so funny.
Exactly.
And
No, and I haven't.
this is the
I
thing when you
I'm
say that.
struggling. I'm struggling, and I haven't been online because I'm always working, right? But I'm like, let me get on, and this is like upsetting. I think I'm gonna call you later. I'm like triggered by how like unrealistic, like it's just overwhelming. Like I
You
don't
think they can be.
understand. I don't understand. And then there's an expectation that women just have to keep it together because we have to. Just because if nobody else does, the world's just gonna go to hell.
Yeah. Yeah. And you said it, and you said the word is expectations. And my next slide was pregnancy and family, because a lot of those expectations start, like you said, in our families of origin. And I'm of the opinion that I think was it Bob Proctor? I can't remember whoever said it. A pro is at their best no matter what. They're going to show up at their best. And this is my best today, right? You guys can hear that I'm sick, fine, right? Right. And I'm going to give my best at any point in time. Maybe I'm not at 100, maybe I'm at 65, and that's okay, right? But showing up is actually powerful. Being present is actually powerful. I think what happens is when we decide to bow to the expectations of others. And we might go over a few minutes today, so you guys bear with me. But when we decide to bow to or bend to the expectations of others, that's when it becomes a problem, right? And we're talking about overarchingly our relationships with other people. So how do those expectations that others have of us, or that we feel others have of us, how do they play into how we then choose to engage and interact with them, right? How we choose to treat them, how we choose to create boundaries surrounding our relationships with them, and so on. Like when it comes to, and Candy, you mentioned this from the beginning, especially as those of us who live in female bodies, right? We have those expectations, like be a good girl, right? You want to be a lady and you want to I don't know, wear cute dresses and be like be silent, giggle, I don't know, whatever the messages and learnings were growing up. But those actually shape our understanding of of what pregnancy means for us, right? So pregnancy then becomes a badge of honor on some level, right? It becomes a check mark. Now I've met the expectations that those who have been in positions of authority over me, I've met their expectations, and I've actually heard this where women have said, I did all the things. I got pregnant, I had children, I got married, I did all the things, but I'm miserable. I don't even like these kids. Like, I don't even wanna raise these children. I don't wanna be in this marriage. And it's like, well, who did you fulfill the expectations for? And I think that that's where the line comes into play, like really being able to figure out what it is that is gonna serve you on some level, because at the end of the day, you have you to deal with. Right? And so while we recognize the expectations, especially when it comes to family, and pregnancy is going to change the relationship you have with your immediate family, it's going to change your in-laws family if you're married, the boundaries are going to get blurred and the expectations are going to surface as it relates to, your spouse or even your other children if you have them or what have you. And there's going to be shifts. There's going to be shifts in who does what, and so on. So we have to really take into consideration, and maybe and here we do the work, right? Maybe it's a matter of um encouraging ourselves and others to do the work of figuring out what's actually going to serve you, as opposed to simply bowing to the expectations that society and media and entertainment and family members and so on place on you, right? And yeah, I think that's important to recognize as well, because Candy, you hit the nail on the head. It can become overwhelming. It can become debilitatingly so overwhelming to try and meet the expectations that others have of us all the time, right? So thanks for that, Candy. Appreciate that. Pregnancy and society. How many minutes am I taking you guys over time? Give me 3 minutes, you guys, and I promise I'll wrap up. Pregnancy and it's a season finale, so you guys can give me a little bit more grace, okay? Um, Season finale of relationship series today, just so you guys know. And then I'll tell you what's coming up next. Okay, pregnancy and society. Of course, there's societal pressures. Um, Statistics show that pregnancy loss, and I'm going to go to the next slide in a second. Pregnancy loss is actually very common. But here's the thing, and I say societal pressures because when I was doing research, the term they used was failed pregnancy. And I thought, failed pregnancy, like, even the terminology is so, like, demeaning, and this is part of what women experience and men experience when there is a miscarriage, right? Um, Women experience a sense of, like, guilt and shame, like they are to blame, like, "Oh, something about my body, something is wrong with my body." Right? It wasn't able to do what it was created to do, what it was supposed to do. And man, that can be so hard when it comes to identity, right? It's like, "Oh, but I'm a woman. I'm supposed to give birth. I'm supposed to get pregnant," right? And so what is wrong with me becomes the question. And we always go back to that, I'm not good enough and so on and so forth, and spiral down. Um, but the term failed pregnancy reinforces that. It reinforces that disposition, right? It's like, oh, I failed in some way, right? And so failure is attributed to the self and to actions that were taken by the self. And so we have to even start beginning to, or we even have to start um, questioning some of this terminology, some of these semantics that we use to describe phenomenon like this, especially common phenomenon, right? And I know they were doing that when it came to suicide back, maybe a few years back, just changing the terminology around it to create more accuracy, right? Less blame, more accuracy. And I know one of the things that I was looking up, because I was looking up for the men's side too. Men experience I think loneliness because they didn't have the miscarriage, right? And so they feel somewhat alienated from the process, unable or not necessarily sure of how to support, their partner going through the miscarriage. And I thought that was interesting too, because they made a distinction between women's most prevalent emotional experiences and versus men's being loneliness, and women's being guilt and shame, and like self-blame. So even when we talk about like social pressure and social expectations, but social definitions and like the way that society shapes and frames, this whole experience of pregnancy and so on. And even I was thinking about it on like a, what's it called, like a institutional level, with corporations and businesses and things like that. There was a woman who she went in, she was actually pregnant. She disclosed that she was pregnant, and when they called her and told her she didn't get the job, and she asked why, and they said, because you told them you were pregnant. That was why she didn't get the job. She was super qualified, super willing and all this thing, but she was pregnant. And of course, no business, they're not going to say this explicitly, but in their hiring practice, this is demonstrated. They'll hire more men in certain positions because they don't want women to be going on maternity leave. They don't want to have to be paying out that time. They don't want to have to contract somebody in for that position. There's so many implications when it comes to like jobs, hiring, wages and things like that in society that are really around pregnancy, or the potential for pregnancy, really for for women, because only women can get pregnant. Um, and then of course we talked earlier about the policies and laws, surrounding women's bodies. Okay, we're gonna do a few stats, some practicals, and then we're out of here. Okay, stats I thought were cool. To know, again, grounding ourselves in the numbers and the facts is important, and not just our personal experiences, right? Okay, so in 2021, there were about 35,000 abortions and 370,000 live births. So this is in Canada. And that's about 10%. So 10%, um, 10% of live births, for every, anyway, for 100% for the live births, are 10% abortions. Okay. I'm not a mathematician, so you guys understand. And then when it comes to miscarriage, up to 25% of pregnancies are miscarried in Canada each and every year. And so we're looking at 1 in 4. That is very common, very, very common, right? That's like, I think, the almost equivalent to heart disease, deaths from heart disease. Like it's like 1 in 6. So very common phenomena. And so it's important for us to know that, but also to start talking about it. Marriage, a second pregnancy or live birth significantly decreases relational satisfaction in marriage. And this is the data shows this over and over. I used to teach at Tyndale sociology of marriage and the family, and the lowest point in the marriage, self-reported marital satisfaction, was always after the birth of a second child. Higher frequency and likelihood of men cheating or getting into emotional affairs after the second child. When do couples most likely go to counseling or sign up for therapy? Right after the second child, right? And so we're looking at so many different factors that happen, right? Dads have to step up more. There's less time, people are more tired, obviously less sexual interaction, intimacy, and so on. And they likely have a toddler, and another child who's like within close age range or what have you, and toddlers just suck because they're just wild. um um, and I was actually a second child, so sorry mom, not sorry. But yes, anyways, after the second child usually is when most couples experience the least amount of satisfaction and go through the most turmoil, because it just puts more strain on the relationship. All right, practicals, here's what we can do. And I like to say, do the do's, do the work, right? And sow what you want to grow. These are seeds that you can sow into your relationships so that they can grow and you can have revolutionary relationships. Get yourself a community, right? A community of people, keep people around you that can support you, not judge you, people who will pray for you, right? And that's wherever you are on in the pregnancy journey. Okay. So if you're thinking about pregnancy, if you're grieving the fact that you're too old now to get pregnant, or you're not in a relationship, all that stuff, like, you still need people around you. Okay. So get some people around you. I'm going to be starting uh, um, some things, some courses, and so on and so forth, for the over 40 and over 30, crowd that's thinking, oh my goodness, I'm never going to get married and have children, or whatever, whatnot, right? So even in that process, and over 50, maybe over 60, who've never had children, right? Grieving the fact that you've never had children, never had the opportunity, right? So get yourself a good community. Perspective, broaden your perspective. Part of broadening your perspective means that you are reading books. Let's say you're listening to podcasts, you're doing the things to broaden and get different ideas, different approaches and different beliefs and understandings about this phenomenon, right? So you want to broaden your perspective. And if you do have to go, again, I want to respect your time. So please, 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 please take time. I'm going over time today. Broaden your perspective, have conversations, you guys. This is why we have transformational conversations. I am a whole therapist, and I say, don't keep silent. Talk about it. As a therapist, I understand the power of having conversations. Conversations are healing, or can be healing. They're not always healing, but they can be very healing. So have the conversation, talk about the things that are on your heart and on your mind, especially when it comes to just even unresolved grief, concerning pregnancy. Some women, they're like, oh, I couldn't have, I had a friend who, I think, my goodness, it was near like 10 miscarriages. And just like walking with her, just the sheer disappointment each and every time. My goodness, I've been asked to be a surrogate parent, a surrogate mother, for women who couldn't have children, right? And you just have to, just have the conversations, talk about some of these pieces, these things, so that they're not, festering and rotting on the inside of you in silence, right? And then, of course, radical care. We talked about this a few weeks back when we were talking about Black mental health. And we were talking about radical Black care. Well, radical care in general, right? When it comes to this piece, radical care means acceptance of the reality of this situation, of what goes on. And I say, there's a quote, I can't remember his name. I think it was Les Brown. Anyway, it was, don't wish things away, wish to be better. Right. And so just don't wish things like, oh, I wish this was happening, or would happen, or what have you. It's no, wish to be better. Wishing to be better means that you're wishing for yourself to gain the capacity, the strength, the confidence, the tools, the skill, the ability, the capacity, the maturity, what have you, in order for you to handle life and what's happening in your life right now. Okay. So I don't wish that I had more money, right? I do the work to get the more money, if that's my goal and my aim. Right. And that's a very simple example, but you guys get what I'm saying. All right. So practicals, get yourself a good community, broaden your perspective, talk about it, and then care for yourself through it. Okay. And of course, that's when you could have revolutionary relationships. All right, personal challenge is the same every week, y'all, as we wind down and close. Apply, change, teach, act in some way. So what's one thing you guys are going to act on this week? You're going to apply something that you've learned. You're going to change something about yourself, and you're going to teach something to someone else. And that just really means sharing something that you've heard or learned. The Mentiverse app is there for download on the Apple or the Google Play Store and the Apple Store, whatever it's called. Download the app for the replays. I'm going to upload all of them after probably next week, because my birthday's next week. I'm going to upload all of them for season 3. What is coming up? Season 4 of the relationship series is starting May the 23rd. We are going to start with a mini series. It's going to be a 4-part series on When Church Hurts. We did an intro to When Church Hurts this season, and I got a lot of feedback, and everybody's like, oh, we need to do a longer series and so on. So we're going to talk about When Church Hurts, and look at identifying the hurt, processing the hurt, healing from hurt, what forgiveness looks like through the hurts, and then reconnecting with God after people have hurt you, especially people who are supposed to represent God in the earth. And then, of course, we're going to go into family matters, and a couple of the things we're going to talk about is raising rich kids, winning with your preteen and teen, talking about family legacy and things like that. So we're going to start with a 4-part series on when church hurts, and then we're going to go into family matters up until July 18th. So join us for season number 4 of the relationship series, coming up starting May 23rd. And then Empower Her is still happening. We're going to do a Belize Wellness retreat the weekend of May 15th to the 18th. If you guys know anybody that wants to come, let me know. If you want to come, let me know, and we'll sort out the details. It's going to be an amazing time. And there we go. We are closing for today. We did go a little bit over time. Thank you for those of you who stayed with me. And I hope that you enjoyed, that you learned something. My MacBook is about to die. It's telling me to plug it in or else it's gonna die. Okay, great. Thank you guys so much for coming out, for hanging out with me. Do you guys have any questions? I would love to take your questions if you do have any. Otherwise, I am going to stop the recording so that we can close actually, I'm going to stop it anyway. Thank you so much for being on the relationship series. Had a blast. Season finale, and looking forward to seeing you guys next season, where we're going to talk about church hurt and family matters.